Hello, this is Terry, and welcome again to the Animation Industry Podcast. Once again, I have another chat with someone who's had a very industrious career in stop-motion animation. That person is Adam Taylor, and he's going to give you an overview of the stop-motion focused studios in the US, how to specialize and become known for a certain animation technique, and what kind of stop-motion tests you should be making at home for your portfolio. But first, here's a little bit more background on Adam. Originally, Adam started off as an illustrator, but when he discovered his love for stop motion, he went to Falmouth University to get an MFA in it. After that, he went on to do an internship at Leica on The Missing Link, and then he was an animator on the Shivering Truth Season 1, Episode 6, and all of Season 2. And now he works as a freelance stop motion animator for various commercial studios in the US. And on top of this, he's a husband and a family man. Now, without further ado, here is our chat. So, hi, Adam. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Terry, doing great. Doing really good.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk all about stop motion because you're an incredibly accomplished stop motion animator. But I'm wondering, before we get into your story, because I always like to know like what was the thing that drove you. Can you just give an overview of all the stop motion studios in the US? Like I've never really. I know there's a couple lists online, but they seem to be outdated. So, and I know that you're pretty familiar with them because you've worked at a lot of them. So can you just give a rundown of where the studios are at and what they're called and whatnot?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I've mostly been focused here in Portland. I grew up not far from here, so this was kind of the first stop that I decided to make. Obviously, there's Leica, an Image Lab, and Shadow Machine, and House Special, and now a new Netflix Wendell and Wild studio. So all of those are fantastic. I love them. And then LA, I haven't done quite as much. Obviously, there's Stupid Buddy that is insanely busy right now, which sounds really exciting. All the projects that they're doing, Starburns and Open the Portal and Apartment D and Bix Pix, all these guys. And I've talked to a lot of them. I've been down and visited them a little bit, but I actually have kids, so moving to LA was a little bit of a harder commitment, so we decided to stay up here and do that. I've also actually traveled a bit, even though like I said I have kids, but traveling for a couple weeks is different than moving for a couple of years. So I've gotten to travel to LA for a few other like little pop-up studios. Social Motion has been Story Lab Studio has been a fun one that we've worked a little bit. The owner there is fantastic, Jace Sardo. He's starting up some cool stuff, so I think they're somebody hopefully to look for soon. Yeah, like I said, I've done some commercial work with some guys out of New Jersey, New York, called Social Motion. So they're also really nice. And then what else have I went to Wisconsin this year. It was just an advertisement agency. They decided to do some stop motion. Fantastic stuff. So anyway, there's more, but I haven't quite made it out east. So we'll have to see how it goes out there.
But okay, so in Portland, because of Leica and whatnot, there's like a big hub of stop motion studios, right? Like, is that why you've kind of settled in Portland? Because there's enough, I know you work on like contracts at one studio and the next studio, but there's enough to, keep perpetually working in stop motion there?
Yeah, more or less. It's like right now, everything is just flooded in. There's so many new people in town because there's 3 feature films going on at the same time.
Yeah, that's insane.
So that's super exciting, and I don't know if that's ever happened before in stop motion. So we're kind of in this weird thing where everybody's busy for a minute.
Nice.
Yeah. And then there's still some commercial and TV stuff going on.
Yeah. So with your kids, are you going to get them into stop motion too? Or are you going to steer them away?
My son told me this week, I'm going to be an animator like you.
Oh my God.
He's 4. So he also wants to be a Ninja Warrior. That's like
oh my
his
goodness.
thing.
So Ninja Warrior or animator could go either way.
He's going to be the animator ninja. That's his.
I love that. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about today is kind of the specific like type of stop motion animation that you specialize in. But let's get into why stop motion for you. Like it's really niche. I personally love it. If you're listening to this podcast, it may not seem niche because I have so many stop motion animators on it, but it is really niche. And so why did you choose to pursue stop motion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually trying to be a children's book illustrator, and I did an okay job at it for about 5 years. That's what I studied in school and thought that's where I was going. But in the back of my mind, I'd always been like more interested in animation. And when I tried to like write a children's book or illustrate, I always had this thing where I wanted the characters to move. And I would reference things like The Misadventures of Flapjack or like Chowder or like all these cartoons that I was loving at the time. Like I was more interested. So anyway, I thought I was doing one thing while I think it was leading me another way. In fact, my senior project, I proposed it as like this intense like multi-book flip book that you use because I thought I was going to animate then, but they didn't actually have animation at the school I went to. It was a little school in Idaho, so no surprise there really. But yeah, so I went and was a children's book animator or illustrator and almost animator. And then I decided I needed to go back to school, mostly because I wanted to know more about like creating your own content and your own voice as an illustrator. And oddly enough, my voice as an illustrator is a stop motion animator. So yeah, I quickly in the program I started fiddling around with animation. I think after like 2 or 3 weeks of learning how to do, I'm talking really basic stuff like how to peel an orange in front of a camera and stuff like that, I decided to do a film. And so I went down to the wood shop, built sets, got some wire and built some puppets, and my awesome wife did the clothes because I didn't really think I could sew that well at the time. And so we jumped in, and within 2 months, I'd made my first stop motion film, and like
insane.
was 100% hooked after that. So I continued school, did stop motion there, and the rest, I've been hooked. I've like barely drawn. I've barely illustrated since. It just totally changed.
Weren't you living in the UK at that time?
Yeah, yeah. We went to the UK for school, Falmouth University,
Yeah.
and which is a great school. It also happens to be on like a couple blocks from the beach, which you don't think of beaches in England, but oh my gosh, beautiful place, like really nice. Those 10 days of sun are the best 10 days ever.
10 days of sun. So okay, so you were doing children's book illustration for 5 years, thinking about it as animation, then decided to go to school to do some animation. How did you end up, from the UK in school, and then somehow you're working in like the top studios in the States right now, like as a expert stop motion animator? Like there's a gap in between there.
No gap, that just happened. No, yeah, so I kept making a lot of films at school. I basically, like I said, like once I started, I decided like, okay, I love this more than I thought I was going to. And so I just kept making films. Like as soon as I stopped the one, I locked myself in the studio and like for weeks would just do practices. And then as soon as something would come up, I did a competition. And it was a really funny little thing. It was for an eyeglasses company, like a lens thing. And so they're like, make a story that shows us how you'll combat the evils of eye fatigue. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds actually really fun. And so I actually have the puppets. I'll hold it up.
The evils of eye fatigue. Oh my goodness.
Evils of eye fatigue. So I made these. I made these little ninjas, call them eye ninjas, and They're super simple. So I put a styrofoam ball, I glued some wire in there, and crumpled up a piece of paper on around them to make their little ninja suits.
Well, now I know why your son wants to be a ninja slash animator. He's been seeing these his whole life.
Exactly. So anyway, long story short of that, I actually won the competition.
Nice.
Um, so it had some money attached, which allowed me to make the next couple of films and get my gear and all of that. So that helped. So I made that, and my goal at the time, since I was in the UK, was land at Aardman because I love their animation. It's like this perfect blend of cartoony but also realistic, lifelike animation. So I just really like their style. So I was shooting for that, and decided to make a cartoon myself. The Hair Hungry Heaver was the name of it. It's like a bunch of lumberjacks out in the woods, and they cut down the biggest tree, and then there's like this beast that shaves off all their beards for to pay them back. And yeah, it's like it's the hairiest gore film like ever made. But
I've seen it. I love it. It's also very stylized and like it's done in a way that's really cute and creative with like some flat surfaces and stuff. Like it's really cool.
thanks. Yeah, that it reflects my like what I love as a filmmaker and as an illustrator is bridging the gap between 2D and 3D. So whenever there's a project like that, I just love that stuff. It
Nice.
really tickles my brain the right way. But yeah, so how to get from England to here is how basically my visa ran out, so it was time to come home,
Were
and
you
I
were
didn't.
you were you in the process of like going through the interviews at Aardman or anything or like getting in contact with them?
Um, as a student, I was, um, Ardman came out to the school and met us, like so got to meet the animation supervisor and even the owners of the company. So that was a
Right.
super exciting day. Like Peter Lord and Dave Sproxton were out
Yeah.
there. We posed with my puppets and stuff. Um, it's really like Morph has a mustache on in this picture. I'll have to show that sometime. But yeah, so they were out there. But as a student, it's really hard to be hired internationally.
Mm.
Um, like here, I have no experience to speak of. Would you prove to your government that I'm worthwhile? And that's a hard sell.
Right.
So, and I understood that. It was like the dream, and then like, oh yeah, reality. So, yeah, we came back. I chose Portland because of all the studios, and we were living here before we went to the UK, without knowing stop motion existed in the Portland.
What?
I know. I
Just
had no
happens just happens to go to where the biggest hub of stop motion in the world.
idea. Funny. Life's funny like that. Like I just didn't know where I was. We actually were when I was illustrating children's books. We were living about 3 miles from Leica while they were making Paranorman. So I just didn't know. But I guess it was like in the air because I was addicted. But yeah.
So you moved to Portland and then you just started like putting your name out there to all the studios, being like, "Hey, I'm a new animator, trained in the Aardman style in the UK."
Yeah. I mean, I threw out as much as I could. Stuff like that was fun to say, which is only semi-true. Like there were some Aardman teachers, and so it was. But I loved saying that. And then yeah, I just tried to meet as many people as I could here in town. One of my friends in the UK, he who helped me with my film. Um, and when I say friend, like I was 10 years older than all the students and 10 years younger than all the teachers. So I was friends with the teachers as much as the students. But yeah,
I'm in
so
the same
my
spot right now.
friend, yeah, you know how it is. So my friend, he was like, hey, I know some animators out there. So he helped me connect with some people. And always, if you can go through a contact, that's just so
Yeah.
much. It just feels better, than being like,
Oh
hey,
yeah. Well,
So
it's just like you're a nameless, faceless person with like an email with like something attached to it. So what was that first job that you ended up getting?
my very first job here in town, um, gosh, it all happened kind of the same time. I went quite a while without any jobs, to be honest. It did take, it took about 6 months before
Oh, wow.
anything
Okay.
started happening. So we went through a lot of savings and we went through a lot of like, okay, but I just kept pounding away. Like I set up a little studio in my garage and kept going. So my first job here in town happened. Yeah, you know what? I'm trying to remember if I think actually my Leica internship was my first job in town.
Does that count as a job?
They did pay.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's a job. Yeah. Well, I know you've trained at Leica and your stuff. Like, do you think that was pivotal in your education in stop motion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, absolutely. I kind of treated that year after I came back from my master's degree as like my fourth year, and so like that's why I didn't work as much as I probably could have that year. I just sat and like I animated every day and used it as like that fourth year of like, all right, this is the big push. Luckily, my Leica internship um, landed in that year, and yeah, that changed the way I looked at things a lot. You can like I learned how little you have to move a puppet. Like when you're doing cartoon stuff on doubles, it's just big, fun, giant, posy stuff. And when you're doing something subtle like they do, it's hairs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So what, okay, so I know a lot of people, and including myself, would love to do the internship at Leica. What is something that you think that they really saw in your demo reel or portfolio or who you were that they were like, we need this guy to come and do this?
uh, um, I think it's about acting. Honestly, um, I it's online. Everyone can see it. I posted what I did, but I built these two characters. I built it around one scene. I wanted some character, like some acting interaction, and I started shooting some reference of myself. So I'm both the male character and the girl character, and they almost like he thinks they're gonna kiss, and so he reaches in and snubs him. So that was fun to play both parts. And like, yeah, I think that's online too. Of like my reference of myself almost kissing myself. That was fun. Um,
I remember seeing that back in the day because I used to like scour YouTube for any stop motion I could possibly find, and I remember seeing it, and it just like stood out so much from everything else that was out there because it wasn't produced like as a professional production from a studio, but it wasn't like this amateur thing. So I was like super confused when I saw it. I was like, is this for a production? Is this like the testing stages for a movie that's coming out or a TV show? Like, what is this? Because it was so well done and like the characters look so great.
Thanks a bunch. Yeah,
Yeah,
I learned so much on that.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was produced with IKEA lights in my garage,
Well,
and
it looks amazing. And you even
stock.
made like a little set and everything. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's where I learned it, and that was the stuff that like I think they saw too, where it was, I did walks and I did character stuff and I did dialogue where I actually had hand sculpted replacement faces, and I just tried to make it look as close as I could to, something they would do, but obviously on
So
like a smaller
your
budget.
intention with that was specifically to get into the Leica internship?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So you were like, this is what I want, and then that makes sense and that's smart. And then you like made something specifically to show them. That makes sense.
yeah.
So after the internship, did you just get picked up right away?
Um, yeah. Luckily, I started talking to studios. Actually, I think I sent out that piece to a bunch of studios. So while I was doing the internship, I was also talking to a lot of people about coming and animating with them after it.
Nice.
Um, the timing is one of the hard things both as an animator and in animation. Like, so while I was doing the internship was when a lot of these jobs were going to hire. And so I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I need the education. That for me was important. So yeah, I went and started talking to some people down in LA, and got to test at Big Pix, which was huge. I think in a day I learned more about TV animation than like I ever have since. Like it was a great day. So testing with them was fantastic. I mean, I guess animating on a TV show is also really good, but that day of testing it taught me a lot about like what you can push. So that was a good experience. And then right after I started working with the commercial studios here in Portland. So my first fun job or big job in with one of the studios was with director Rob Shaw, which he's a great guy. We still talk and work together. But he did this beautiful felted animation. It's all felted, and it was for Christmas, and it's for the dairy farmers of Canada. And my gosh, it is still one of the cutest things I've ever got to animate. So it's like felted Santa Claus like softly comes along, and there's the cutest little reindeer. That was my first shot. Was he's just like springing up in front of the camera and this big camera move and the whole thing. And I was like, okay, I hope I can do this. Like, but it was a blast, and I'd never done felting before, so I learned how to like change facial expressions and even make them blush and swallow and do all kinds of things like on stage.
Nice.
They're like, just take this felt and stab it to the puppet, and when you're done, like pull it off and do a new stab. And it was like,
Nice.
what? But yeah, it was really great.
That's something that I want to learn too. I'm super. I think my next like personal short film I want to do with felt because I just love how it looks and it looks really fun. So what is your life like now that you've been around the block a little bit? You've animated on some really cool things. You just got picked up for an animation role on a Netflix show. So how is it going? What's your life like?
I'm really enjoying life at the minute, I'll be honest. Yeah, last year was turbulent. I moved 3 times last year for work. And so I guess the first time we were living somewhere, second time there was a project out in a different area, and then moved to Portland. So that was crazy. Now I'm really feeling good of like, I get to sit still. I get to do some stuff. But right now I'm just in the studio, and I just started recently on Henry Selick's film, Wendell and Wild. So extremely excited. I know all of us would love to work with Henry Selick and animate on that stuff. So I'm like, for all of us, I'll give, like, woohoo, because I feel really lucky, and I'm an assistant animator. So my job right now is to test things mostly, which is it's like a position that's not really talked about. We all think, oh, I'm going to be an animator and I'm going to get in front and do those hero shots of, Jack Skellington walking through the gardens and the graveyards and stuff. And it's like, that's like the best guy. So what I'm doing is testing things, making sure they work, clothing or effects or weird ideas they have. And so that's actually a lot of fun, and it feels like a cross between working with really good equipment and good people and being in my garage. Because like, you just test random things and say, this one worked, this one didn't, or I guess show them and they decide that.
So I guess the process is it's like, you've got the storyboards for the final production, and then you have to figure out if the puppets and the effects and the rigs can make that happen.
Yeah.
And then you go to the director, I'm just assuming, and say like, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. Maybe you go back to the puppet fabrication department and you're like, we need this or that. And then after all of that, then the senior animator or the animator on the show takes all that knowledge and recreates the scene.
Yeah, for a lot of it, depending on what it is, like, it, I mean, again, we're just starting, but this it also happens that if I do a good enough job on it, maybe I earn the trust to get a little shot in the film. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of the hope of it is like you test something and you go and use it. But obviously, if it's like I don't know, I'm testing, let's say, a car in the background of a shot that has all these hero characters and it's a really important shot. They're not going to give me those hero characters, but there's a possibility that I might animate the thing in the background still.
Yeah.
Um, either either on stage with the animator, sometimes you team up, or since we love green screens and computers, I might do it on a test stage or another stage, and then they'll put it in afterwards.
So from my experience with stop motion, to get something to look a certain way takes a lot of like knowledge of working with the puppet and doing it in a very specific way. Like, oh, I have to move it forward before I move it to the side to get it to, I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? So are you constantly in touch with the animator who's going to be working on those hero shots where you're like, oh, do it like this because I learned that if you set it up this way or do it this way, it's not going to work? Or do they just watch what you've done and try to learn from what you've done?
That's a good question. I haven't gotten that far. I'll be
Uh-huh.
honest. Yeah.
So how typical is this setup for a production in like a studio like Stupid Buddies or Leica or whatnot?
This is the type of stuff that happens for feature films.
Mm.
Uh, on a TV show, I've just finished one myself. I was on the second season of Shivering Truth.
Yes.
So it's an insane show. That type of production, TV is fast and it's just get it done, and you don't test things. Like they give you, let's say, here I'll show one of my puppets from my film. All right,
Yes.
all right, so
Oh,
this
he's
is
so big. Oh my gosh, I didn't think he'd be that big.
he's there, so he's the tallest. Um, but this guy, let's say, all right, he needs to be shaved, and so you need to shave him, and hopefully, like, they'll hopefully have done something along those lines, but you really won't know until you're on stage
Yeah.
how that works. They'll kind of tell you, but it's mid shot that you figure it out. And so I would like in this, they're attached with magnets, right? So I prepped, but sometimes it's a different head that you have to put on, or sometimes it's literally like destroying the puppet frame by frame. So I'd go in there and I'd cut little bits off, and we use like, oh, here's a piece of fabric that looks like what we used. Here's some clay and anything else you need. Here's a box of supplies. So TV is completely different than a feature film.
Gotcha. I just have to, if you're listening to this on like SoundCloud or iTunes, I do upload these to YouTube so you can take a look at what Adam's showing just as a plug. Okay, so you just landed this new gig, which I think is amazing, but I'm wondering if you can like backtrack a little bit and just kind of give me like a general, how many projects do you work on a year? Like you said, you moved 3 times last year. Does that mean you're working on like 3 contracts a year? Like what is, if I want to become like a full-time stop motion animator, what is my you give that a little look. What is my year look like? How many productions am I working on? How much am I moving around? Am I staying at the same studio? Like what does that look like?
Every single animator has a different answer to this.
Okay, so what's your answer?
I do it a little bit differently. So I'm kind of trying to stay semi still. So although, honestly, if Australia's got an awesome project, I'll be there, but last year I moved 3 times, which means that I've worked on at least 3 projects that needed me physically there. So Yeah, last year that was the case. Worked on project here in Portland. I was actually commuting in from living at the coast, out at the beach. So I was like, I had that one. Then I had a studio that wanted me to come out just for a short time, but long enough that we decided to move instead of me just like living in a hotel, which happens. So we moved down there, and then we moved back here for this. So that's 3 projects. But this summer I worked on 3 commercials. One was in LA. One was in Cincinnati, and one was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wow.
So that, and then in between those, to make things keep going, because one, I like to animate, so I want to keep animating, and I like to get paid and eat, so I like to keep working. So in between all of that, I slotted in some commercials that I shot in my own garage setup, which I'm always upgrading and making sure that it's, professional level lighting and camera and lenses and all that. So I do that there, as well as like music videos and my own projects. So the answer is you do a lot and you make things happen and you just kind of piece it together as you can.
So you're constantly, I guess, on the lookout for a new gig, I guess,
Yeah.
when you know that one is like coming up. For the commercials, are you scouting those out yourself, or are you getting them through like connections? Like, how do you end up working on something so, I guess, freelance on the side when you're mostly working at studios?
Yeah, it's a combination of connections. Knowing people always helps,
Yeah.
so I think half of the jobs I got this year is because a friend needed somebody to join them, or needed to replace them, or just recommended me to a person who had talked to them.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing, and luckily stop motion's fairly small. So you start talking to one person and all of a sudden you like have met half of the town and you're like, oh gosh. So
Now I got work. So
yeah.
you're not like constantly going through interview processes all the time. People are like, "Hey Adam, do you want to like come over here and work on this?" And you're like, "Sure." It's not
Yeah.
like you have to, reach out to HR and send your demo reel and stuff like that.
Um, not for a lot of the stuff I do. If it's edited, it all depends. It all depends. But sometimes, yes. Sometimes, um, you know, knowing directors and producers helps a lot because they know what's happening. And so if they already know the quality of your work, then they're gonna say, all right, well, this guy will be a good fit for this.
Yeah.
If you're contacting a new studio, you're always gonna send them a new reel, and you're gonna come in with your best face and do your interview thing. And a lot of the times that seems to just happen online,
Hmm.
or over the phone. Here in Portland, like they'll ask, if they've got a big project coming up, they'll bring you into the studio and say, hey, are you interested in this?
Yeah.
Which is
So,
almost always a yes.
yeah. So what have been some of the highlights? Because you worked on a ton of projects. Have been some of the highlights of your career in stop motion at this point?
um, I mean, gosh, everything's been fun. It's really hard, like even the worst project. Some people I tell like these stories of some of the productions I've been on, and they're just like, that sounds so crazy. But like for instance, I shot. This is not my normal rate, but we had a very tight turnaround, and so we were shooting like 45 seconds to a minute a day, and we
A
were there.
minute.
We were like there from like 9 a.m. to like 1 or 2 a.m. Like we were just pushing it. So, but honestly, like they were so nice, and it was so much fun to hang out with those people, that even though we were there all day and I was exhausted and like I think my eyes were starting to fail, but I was like, nope, we're good.
The
And
evils of eye fatigue.
eye fatigue and wrist and hands and back, and everything hurts. It's stop motion, everything hurts.
Well,
But
yeah.
even that was a highlight. One of the things that I've really enjoyed though is in between the projects. I like to do my own projects. So I think my favorite thing that I've animated thus far, or at least on par with it, is it's a concept and characters that I've been working on for the past couple of years. So, I built the world, and I invited my friend Gavin that I'd met at Leica, and he came and lit it and did the camera work and set us up, and so like it was a collaboration, but it was in my world and my space, and I got in there and did, and it was so much fun, and like honestly, I loved every second of animating that.
Yeah. Have you published this?
What's that?
Have you published this?
This one's a secret still.
Oh.
Come out. Hopefully, it'll come out before long. It's actually for a show that I'm developing the pitch for. So hopefully, it comes out in a big way.
Yes, that would be amazing. Oh my gosh. You mentioned, okay, so everything hurts, which I understand. I'm just curious, do you negotiate, or is it built into the contracts like health benefits? Like physio or massage and stuff like that?
At a big studio that you're there for a long time. Someone like Leica or Netflix, they know that you're going to be there for a long time, and they tend to take care of that, so they'll offer you health benefits. When you're on a job for a couple days or weeks,
that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you kind of you buy yourself, a little ball in a sock, and you rub it against the wall and massage your own back. And
you should get them to pay for that. Be like, I need an extra $5 for a new tennis ball.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it sucks. So one thing I want to chat about is, so stop motion is already a niche, but you kind of, I don't know if intentionally, but you've carved out a niche within stop motion for yourself with the type of animation that you do and the type of animation that people come to you for. So I wonder if we can talk about that, because you kind of specialize in walk cycles, and when we were chatting before this, you called it like subtle human acting. So can you just explain what your specialty is and how you kind of develop that within this niche? Because what I thought, sorry, I'm just ranting. What I thought before was, you're hired on as an animator for a show, and then you kind of just animate the whole scene and everything in that, right? But like, what you told me before is you've developed a specialty for what they bring you in for. So
yeah, every director, and they tend to see a little bit different in what they like about you. But animators, I mean, we've all heard this, but animators are basically cast like actors, and so you're brought onto a project because they've seen something that they like, and they want to bring that to their project. The acting is something that I feel like it's because I really enjoy it. And I developed it because like the stuff I was talking about earlier, getting into Leica, it was like, oh, they act. Like, that's acting. And so I just kept going into it. And I feel like part of it is because I tried to act on stage in high school, like in musicals and in the plays and stuff. And honestly, like acting in front of people, it was fun, but it wasn't like the acting experience I wanted, because there are a bunch of people, and when I get excited and when I start thinking, my words just turn off. Like, I have a very visual brain, which a lot of us in the creative industry do, but my words like literally get blocked. So I was up on stage and like nothing would come out sometimes, or I'd improvise and make something totally up. So acting's always something I've been interested in, but not something that I like felt comfortable doing in front of people, really. Not stage fright ways, just it was hard. And so coming into the studio and having this space where it's isolated and like no one's gonna come in while I'm doing things, like I'll act it out over and over and really try to get to feel it. So that's the acting side of things. But the actual type of shots that I get, I think, come from what they just like see when they're talking to me. I tend to do a lot of things that they call like endearing or sincere, or like there's something in the eyes, and I don't like honestly. It's something that comes from you while you're animating. You once you pose a puppet into a way that you feel is the right thing for that moment, it's because that's how you feel about it inside. So that I think that's part of why I get the shots and the characters and the things that I have is because when I pose the puppet, it looks like how I would, a little bit awkward, but a lot sincere, and like just has that charm to it, I
So,
guess.
so what's an example of, taking something from the average, this character's posing and acting it out to like pushing it and getting out those subtle, like you can tell the character's endearing. And so, like, what is something that you incorporate specifically to get that? Is it an eye movement? Is it like a fidget of the hand? Like, what are some examples?
Um, yeah, I mean, it depends on the character, but one example that I really had fun on, and it'll come out later. No spoilers, just talking a little bit. But I really had fun on this segment of having two characters fall in love, and it was a complete journey of the two started out not liking, not really knowing each other, not really anything, and so it was more stiff, it was more rigid, it was, and then softening them over the course of 2 minutes and just giving them like more more glisten in the eye, a little more flutter in the eyelashes or eyelids, and soft shapes in the brows, and the way that their body, instead of being rigid, bringing them in a little bit, having like I'm doing here. It's hard to explain, but like when you have someone who's put off, things tend to come out. It's a barrier. So when you have someone who's more sincere and open, the gestures tend to come inside a little bit more, and they're slower and softer. um, so I guess I enjoy that part of it, where there's kind of less happening. You've got a pose that you like, and you come in and you stay in that, and you just act it, and give some hands, give some shoulders and eyes, and that tends to go a long way. That
Yeah,
when
I think you did a good job of explaining that. I really understand that, and it gets me excited about like, sometimes I focus on storytelling and just like plot points, but to really capture someone, I love to see like you don't even notice that the characters are stiff. It's just like this subconscious thing that you kind of feel when you
yeah.
watch something. So I love that you have like a progression of storytelling and just how the characters are being around each other. I think that's great. What do you do ahead of time to prepare for something like that? Are you talking with the director and they're like, okay, they're stiff here, or is it really you're trying to diagnose these things as you read the script or see the storyboards or something?
Yeah, it's a combination. I love when a director has a vision for a scene and a sequence, and they kind of walk it through, and you can. I think one of our jobs as animators is to watch them and like get inside their brain and just like watch those eyes and see what's really happening, um, because they tell so much of what they want, but they're also visual creative people, so sometimes the words aren't the ones that so there's a lot in their body language and things, so watching them
Mm.
tells you what they want without them, so it's watching and listening with the director. And then as far as preparing, for me, sometimes I'll draw it, sometimes I'll act it, sometimes I'll do live reference of myself, and use the parts in that I like, and just try to find those pieces. So
It sounds like a lot of prep work before, because like I'm very tempted to just jump into animation right away. That's something I learned over the summer when I was working on my short film, The Silly Duck Wizard. I would just jump into animation right away and then watch it and be like, it's missing so much. And then I redo it again and again and again. And then towards the end, I started actually acting it out and like prepping my scenes. And my mind was naturally like, this is going to take way too much time up front where I just want to jump in animation, but then it turned out so much better. So
Yeah.
I'm learning to do that myself. I love that you like film. So when you film yourself, are you looking for those subtle things that you do when you're naturally acting this out and then try to put those into the characters?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I love to see what odd hand things we do that we don't think about.
Right.
The difference being like when you have an idea in animation, you always point and tap your
Right.
head. But when you have an idea in real life, my hands did that. There's like some wrist things, there's some little finger things. Like very rarely is someone in a vaudeville production and doing a silent film where they
Yeah.
all those stories. So I like to see that where it's like that's still a story pose. That's still that strong main idea, but
Mhm.
it's not the one that I would have chosen had I been doing, I don't, say a Mickey Mouse cartoon from the 30s. Like,
Right, right, right. Well, those movies are almost like cliche at this point. Like if you do like the classic, like I have an idea and point your finger up and a light bulb comes up, like everybody's seen that a billion times. I think it's almost more interesting to not have that and not have the not push that in the viewer's face, like,
right.
so I like that you've done that. Do you think when when somebody's watching your work, how do you think they're experiencing these subtle things are like in the animation in the moments? Do you think they're really sticking out to someone who's watching it, or is it just something that enhances the overall performance?
I hope they're not watching it. I mean, like, I want them to watch it, but I want it to be felt. You know,
Yeah,
when you're doing subtle things and trying for realism, you want it to be felt. You know, which don't get me wrong, like this is what I do a lot of the time. I love cartoons and I love to project and stuff, and to do things that are watched. But when I'm doing subtle stuff and when that's what it is, it's more of a feeling. I want the person to forget that they're watching animation for a minute and just feel this moment of humanity.
nice.
Because I love those stories. I tend to watch that in my free time. Is like stories of slice of life humanity. So if I can get a little bit of that into animation, I like that too.
So what is, I guess you kind of answered it, and maybe you're doing this through the short film that you're creating, but what is the world that you want to show people with your skills?
In my own time.
Yeah, or just or whenever you're animating, like, and you're thinking about these subtle moments and coming across as feelings felt, like what is the story that you're trying to tell through your art?
Wow, that's a good question, Terry. Um,
Welcome to the podcast.
yeah, man, that one. That right now, honestly, I love having the director kind of guide that. And
Hmm.
so I love jumping into the project and figuring out what that project needs. So depending, like sometimes I do love to show that awkward character who doesn't fit into society, but who's really a good person and loving on the inside, but a little awkward and odd on the outside. Mostly, I'm telling my story, you
Yeah.
know, because that's the story I have. Um, and so I feel those characters that if I guess that's the answer is like a lot of times I'm animating myself and and that's all I really can. The other stuff that I animate is from like that insane library of animation over the last 35 years that I've watched nonstop because I've always watched a ton of cartoons and movies and TV. It's just I've loved it. Um, so I pull a lot of from that too. But when I get the chance to have those characters or tell an awkward romance story, like I love those too, or a family moment, I love those because that's what I live. Now, don't tell my wife that I said
She'll be like, wait a minute. Awkward romance. What are you talking about?
yeah, that's not what I mean. We're two artists. We're two quirky people. So
What
that's
does your wife do?
My wife's a children's book illustrator. So
Interesting. So you started off as a children's book illustrator as well, and we're like, I'm not for this world anymore.
she's so brilliant. She's an amazing illustrator, and it's been interesting seeing both of us kind of not diverge in life, but to specify or you know really hone in on what we do.
Yeah.
Uh, she's great, and I love to just like be her fan instead of be there and like feeling a little bit. Oh man, she drew that so much cooler than I did. Like now I have to draw something better over here.
Now we know the real reason you're not. No,
She's so.
I just want to say I love that you shared, what your dream was. I think that's very genuine and like heartfelt. And just hearing you talk about it, I was getting excited. So I think that's great. You're living the dream right now. You just got picked up for a Netflix show, which I think is amazing. Like what is the next step in your career? You mentioned that you're going to be pitching a show. Like where do you want to take this further, I guess?
Yeah, I'm loving being an animator, like, and so I have two goals that I don't know which one's gonna win. Right now I'm pushing a little bit harder on animation, so just to be an animator working on films and TV it's really fun. I really enjoy it. But my goal as a director and as someone who has for a long time created my own characters and stories and was the whole reason I went back to school and all of this stuff. So I'm gonna show them, and we'll deal with it later. We'll see
Oh
what
my gosh,
happens.
is this the first glimpse of them?
Yeah. I'm gonna show.
Hey.
So I'll try to show them one at a time. Here we go. So I've got these characters that
Oh,
I've made.
what? Oh my gosh. Oh my. What is that made of?
This is just a Sculpey maquette,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's a sculpture. But we got another one here.
Oh wow. Wait, you made your own sculptures before you even made the puppets to like see what they look like. They
Yeah,
look
yeah.
incredible.
So there's one more guy. I'm gonna leave him in the box. His tail's a
All
little
right.
brown, but we'll leave one secret. And yeah. So anyway, it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon in the biggest sense.
Yeah, it totally looks like that style. Like that's my immediate thought of what it was. And like, well, I guess if you're not watching this, one of them is holding a sword, so I can already imagine what's going on there.
Yeah. So like I said, I love cartoons, and so it's this odd thing where I love subtle animation, I love acting and the humanity side of it, but I also love squash and stretchy 1940s, 50s cartoons, 30, that golden era of cartoon animation. I just
Yeah.
love it,
Oh,
and
man.
so that's where I want to go as a director is like bringing that kind of back into stop motion. Stop motion, because they're puppets, they're so good at just being an object and like acting as a character, but it often gets forgotten how much we can do animation in the classic of like we can change something from this to this so fast and so easy, few in betweens and a magic trick, and we got it.
So
um,
is your character like squash into like a ball completely and then like jump up into something else?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
One of the shots that I loved doing, he jumped and he went from, let's say, 6 inches. He's about a 6 inch torso and head, and then I stretched that into something that was over a foot long,
What?
and he jumped out across the screen more than a foot long, and then he squashed into a ball and rolled along and then bounces up into something else. And
Oh man,
so
I'm so excited. This is something that I also want to do because I like stop motion so easy to just replace with
yeah.
like abstract form that just represents it. So I'm so excited you're doing this. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you talked about this. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Like, I think one of my favorites from the old generation of animators, George Pal. Oh my gosh, his animation and the Puppetoons. If people aren't familiar with those, they're
Oh
just
yeah.
gorgeous. Like everything is a wooden toy that's a replacement to the next frame. And
I can't even believe. So I've seen those, and I can't even believe that he carved like I don't know how many hundreds of puppets in
yeah,
different positions. Like it's insane, and it's done. It's done before any software existed, where you could like go back and watch to see if you even replaced the puppet properly. Like it's
yeah,
insane.
yeah. He just does
They're
beautiful.
really cool. Yeah, yeah.
So that when I saw that and the Fleischers cartoons and how they did their work and a few other things like yeah, I love that stuff. It gets me really excited on a totally different thing. So I
Wow. I can't even wait to see this. I hope you give me like an exclusive preview.
absolutely we'll do that later.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So what? So maybe as we're just wrapping it up here, what advice would you give someone else who, is looking at stop motion and really enjoys it and wants to pursue something as a professional career in it?
Yeah, as a career, I'd say realize how competitive and how small it is. Um, like I said, I went to school and then I spent 6 months of like animating every day, and then like got my internship where I animated every day, and then I went and animated every day, and then I got jobs where I animated every day. So there's a theme here
Yeah.
where it's a ton of hours. Like I think I made 6 films while I was in school just to get enough like mileage so I knew how to move a puppet. And by
How
the
long were these films? I'm just curious.
time between a minute and 5 minutes.
Okay.
So and like some of them were done so fast. So it's not even the quality of those films. Like don't watch them if you don't have to. Like some of them are fun and some of them are like meh. But the idea is like just put in a lot of mileage,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that's for every art form. Like you don't want to be the guy, the art student who talks about how good of an illustrator they are or an animator. You want to be the one who is doing it, and even if you can't quite show it yet, like that mileage is gonna pay
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, if you're animating every day, you must be learning an insane amount of. You must not even be realizing how much you're learning over a
Absolutely,
period of time. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
and
I think that's great advice. Yeah. And stop motion's super niche. So if the animators in stop motion are animating every day, like catch up.
it is, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know as much. Like when you're on a big long project, people tend to just animate at work.
Yeah.
I still animate at night because I'm, like not every day. I'm not gonna say I'm a masochist. Like if I work all day, like it's occasionally when I like it, But I want to try new things still. There's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
so much to learn and to experiment with, and yeah.
Yeah.
So just the other thing is like don't be frustrated by not being the same animator as someone else. Like that's the point is you're different and that's why they're going to hire you.
Yeah.
But like be the best one. Like don't sell yourself short by not actually working at it and saying, "Well, mine's, janky animation because that's how I do it." And it's like, "Well, is it or is it because you didn't try to smooth it out and then you made a choice?" So
Right.
I think do that, but there's shots that I don't do. There's shots that people do that are amazing, and I look at them and I'm like, I would have done that so differently, but I love what they did.
Right. Yeah.
So like, be the animator you are. If you love to work with toys or objects, and you don't want it like the idea of manipulating an entire puppet and controlling a human basically like just doesn't appeal to you, then that's okay. Like there's spots for that too. I've got friends, like Javen, you talked about, or you
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about it. Javen's amazing. He's fantastic. I think on the interview he even admitted he says I'm not a character animator, I'm an object animator. Now, he's fantastic at characters too, but he has a brain that's different, and he loves doing things with no limbs that are just objects. Seeing people do stuff with paper and sand and clay and paint, just like
Yeah.
just by animation. That's my number one thing. Like, if you get into a studio and then it's not it's because you were doing something that you don't love, you're gonna hate it. Like, it
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
matter what
Yeah.
the paycheck is. It's then just a job. So like, enjoy it and try to love it as much as you can.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because sometimes I have a fear of because there's with social media you see so much online and you're like, oh my gosh, this person is amazing at like character animation or this person's amazing at like doing stuff in the physical environment and like I love watching that, but it doesn't excite me the same way as doing this. But do I need to know that as well so that people can see I'm diverse? Like
Yeah.
it's intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, try everything if you can.
Right.
Like, I just built myself a down shooter, so I'm gonna do some more paper animation on a down
That's
shooter because
right.
it's fun. You
Yeah.
know, try it. If you like it, then keep doing it. If you don't, so.
Yeah. Nice. So is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up our chat?
Man, this has been fun.
Good. Me too. I've enjoyed it. Yeah. I just realized an hour has passed and I thought I was like maybe we are at 20 minutes. No.
um, yeah, no, I think we've talked about just about everything.
Yeah.
I guess as far as like something that helped me a lot is for the students out there, like, don't be afraid of reference. Um, in all art forms, like, use reference.
Yeah.
Now, don't be a photocopier or like just rotoscope unless that's the thing you love to do. There's a place for all of it, but like, learn from the reference, exaggerate it, pull back and underdo it. Try to do everything you can. Um, we've talked a lot about walks and about acting and stuff, and one of the things that I really have fun doing um, is boiling a walk down to like, what are the key moments in there. Like, does the hip go up or down or stay level? When does it do it? So does it do it in the passing pose, or does it do it in the contact, or does it do it in the swing through? Like, there's infinite possibility to take one piece of reference and then turn it into something completely different. Um, just case in point, like, look at the Fleischer cartoons and then look at Disney cartoons. Fleischer's used rotoscope and used reference a lot, and they made it look so much fun and weird, and it's just like, wow, that Cab Calloway stuff they did where
Yeah.
he's dancing around and you're like, what is going on? Like, I can tell that it's rotoscoped, but it's also something different.
Yeah.
And then look at um, the princesses that they did, Snow White, stuff like that, where it's like, that's also rotoscoped. They then went and animated a bit on top of it, but two completely results with, like, they could have used the same reference and got different things. So as an animator, take the reference and do something with it
Nice.
that feels good to you, and experiment. If you don't like the first one, go back and do it again.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure to chat. I'm glad I got to pick your brain, and congrats on your latest job. And I also can't wait to see your personal short film.
Thanks. Thanks so much. This has been so much fun. Really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks for letting me talk about my little journey and stuff.
No, I love hearing that. That's when I was a young stop motion animator and there wasn't really the internet or social media, it was like such a lonely journey and like I didn't know anybody and it was really tough to like figure out where to go next, so I just didn't. So now
Yeah.
that I'm getting back all into this, it's like fascinating for me to hear what people actually did to pursue something like stop motion or any of the roles that I've had on this podcast.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah, one last thing I'll throw in there. If you have a wife or girlfriend or whatever partner, make sure they understand what animation is and that you're gonna like be really busy.
Yeah, right. Well, when you were saying you just like go away and stay in a hotel for however long, I was like, oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
My wife, Erin Taylor Illustrator. Go look her up. Follow her on Instagram because she's worth it in every way. But she's also insanely supportive, and my kids too. So it's a family effort, definitely.
Nice. Yeah, and we'll have to follow your kid once he decides he's going to become an animator too. Cool. So if you're listening and you'd like to follow Adam's work and get in touch with him, you can check out his Instagram, which is @AdamTaylor_animator, or his wife, which is Erin Taylor, I'm assuming _illustrator.
Yeah.
And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye.